Hello viewers, you're watching our special program Democracies of the World, our show on Sansad TV where we take you through the latest happenings of Parliament from across the globe. In today's edition, our top focus will be on Australia, where the newly elected Prime Minister Anthony Albanese appointed a record number of women to his cabinet. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll also take you through the parliamentary structure of Colombia, third most populous country in Latin America. I'm your host Bhawna Nayar. Let's start the program with Colombian presidential elections. Emerging from the coronavirus pandemic, Colombians voted for the first round of presidential polls on May 29th. Beyond the pandemic and its economic fallout, the country faces challenges like handling an influx of Venezuelan migrants, recent social unrest, and organized crime. Traditionally being ruled by right-wing parties, this election is likely to bring political change in the country, with a left-wing candidate likely to emerge as the winner. Let's take a look at this report.
Colombia's presidential election appears destined for runoff after a preliminary result on May 29 showed no candidate had garnered over 50% of the votes. Early results showed left-wing candidate Gustavo Petro with just over 40% of the votes. The populist former mayor of Bucaramanga, Rodolfo Hernandez, with 28% and right-wing candidate Federico Gutierrez with 23%. Petro and Hernandez are now expected to face each other during a second round of voting on June 19th. Both candidates have promised to change Colombia and shake up its politics, which for decades has been dominated by a small and powerful elite in the capital, Bogota. If Petro 62 wins, he will be the first left-wing president in the country's history. He has promised to fix the country's deep inequalities and switch its reliance on fossil fuels to clean technology. The unexpected result for Hernandez, a 77-year-old construction magnate with the populist touch reminiscent of the US's ex-president Donald Trump, marks an upset for the traditional right. The vote took place in one of the most turbulent times in Colombia's modern history, with the country plagued by the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic, social unrest and a deteriorating security situation. Iván Duque, the deeply unpopular outgoing president, was not allowed to stand again because he was restricted to a single term by the constitution. Colombia's electorate is younger than ever and voters are disaffected by the lack of opportunity and deepening inequality, as well as rising violence from armed groups that many attribute to a shoddy implementation of the country's 2016 peace agreement. This discontent propelled anti-government demonstrations that swept the country last year and was amplified by the government's brutal response. Colombia's current conservative president, Iván Duque, is the country's least popular head of state on record. This is due in part to his handling of the protests.
The third most populous country in Latin America, Colombia is the first independent constitutional government. Additionally, Colombia is home to two of the oldest political parties in South America, the Liberal Party, founded in 1848, and the Conservative Party, founded in 1849. Today, the government of Colombia is considered a republic, which means that members of the government are elected or appointed by the general public. To ensure a complete separation of powers, the government of Colombia is divided into three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. This report takes a closer look at each one.
Colombia is a presidential democratic republic and a state with decentralized government. Until 1991, Colombia was officially governed by the 1889 Constitution. The growing military and social unrest of the 1980s and the killing of 4 presidential candidates in the late 1980s finally led large sectors of the society to agree that a new constitution was necessary. The much-lauded 1991 Constitution sought to democratize society as part of an effort to re-legitimize the state. In 1998, the President, the Vice President, Congress and regional councils were elected in accordance with the rules of the new Constitution. The new Constitution describes the country as a social state a unitary and decentralized republic with partial autonomy of regional authorities, which is based on participative and pluralist democracy. The country's government has three branches: executive, legislative and judicial. The executive power dominates the other branches of the government and is vested mainly in the President, the Vice President, Council of Ministers and administrative departments. Under the 1991 Constitution, the President is elected by a majority, that is more than 50% vote with direct and universal suffrage. Means a second round takes place if no presidential candidate obtains a majority. The President, both head of government and chief of state, is in charge of the general administration of the country and the protection of national state interests. He is also the commander-in-chief of all the armed forces. The President is also empowered to direct foreign relations of the state, to declare a state of emergency and also suspend liberties and to convene extraordinary sessions of the Congress. The term of office is 4 years and the President may be re-elected to a single consecutive term. The President appoints the ministers and directors of administrative agencies. Legislative power is vested in a bicameral Congress composed of a Senate with 108 seats and a House of Representatives with 172 seats. Members of both houses are elected by popular vote to serve 4-year terms. This branch of government is responsible for enacting laws and policies. The lawmaking process consists of 7 steps: initiative, debate by each chamber of Congress, voting, passing, sanction, enactment and publication. Members of the Congress meet twice a year, from 20th July to 16th December and from 16th March to 20th June. The judicial power is exercised by the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court, the Attorney General's Office and the Council of State, which is responsible for the state administration issues. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Moving on, Australia's opposition Labour Party has won the 2022 general elections, ending 9 years of conservation rule in the country. Anthony Albanese was sworn in as the country's 31st Prime Minister. A record 13 women, including the first female Muslim, were sworn in as ministers in Australia's new government. Let's take a look at this report.
I present the Honourable Anthony Albanese.
Australia's new Labour government secured majority in Parliament, winning at least 76 of the 150 House seats, the minimum required to form a majority government. Labour Party leader Anthony Albanese was sworn in as Australia's 31st Prime Minister on 23rd of May.
I, Anthony Norman Albanese, do solemnly and sincerely affirm and declare that I will well and truly serve the Commonwealth of Australia, her land and her people in the office of Prime Minister.
The country voted on 21st May following a 6-week election campaign that focused on pandemic-fueled inflation, climate change and fears of a Chinese military outpost being established less than 1,200 miles off Australia's shore. Voters voted out Prime Minister Scott Morrison's Conservative government in a shift likely to bring greater action on climate change, women's issues and anti-corruption efforts. Of the 30 ministers appointed to the new government, nearly half are women. Women also hold a record 10 spots out of 23 in core cabinet roles. Anne Ely was sworn in as Australia's first female Muslim minister, while Ed Husic became the first Muslim to serve in the cabinet. Linda Burney became the first woman and only the second Indigenous person to serve as Indigenous Affairs Minister. Albanese says the first pillar of Australia's foreign policy is its alliance with the United States. He supports a long-term alliance, AUKUS, with Britain and United States to equip Australia's Navy with nuclear-powered submarines. The new Australian leader has promised too to strengthen relations in the Asia-Pacific region. In dealing with the more aggressive posture of China in the Asia-Pacific region, he says the new government will still stand up for Australia's values. Soon after taking oath, Albanese attended Tokyo Quad meeting with US, Japanese and Indian leaders. Son of a single mother, Albanese has been a Member of Parliament since 1996. known as Elbow, Albanese also had a brief stint as Deputy Prime Minister in 2013. The leader of opposition since 2019, Albanese has for long been one of the most prominent voices of the party's left faction. However, for this election cycle, the Labour leader has softened his left-wing image. Albanese promised to improve Australia's aged care sector, improve its manufacturing industry, provide cheaper childcare and lessen the gender wage gap. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Moving on to our next story, following the recent mass shootings in the United States, Texas, Canada introduced a new legislation on Monday to tighten gun control laws. The new bill, expected to go into force this fall after being passed by Parliament, puts a national freeze on handguns.
Canadian government has introduced a new law that, if passed, would implement a national freeze on buying, importing, transferring and selling handguns.
We're capping the market for handguns.
This is the latest in a series of steps that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has taken to restrict the sale of firearms, since 22 people were killed in Nova Scotia province in 2020 after a gunman went on a shooting spree. After the attack, the government had banned 1,500 types of military-grade and assault-style firearms.
We're introducing legislation to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership. What this means is that it will no longer be possible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in Canada. In other words, we're capping the market for handguns.
Trudeau's proposal also came just a week after a teenager killed 19 children and 2 teachers in an elementary school in Texas, reigniting a debate in the United States about whether Congress should impose more restrictions on the sale of firearms to curb gun violence. The new legislation would fight smuggling and trafficking by increasing criminal penalties and strengthen border measures. The bill would also take away firearms from people involved in acts of domestic violence or criminal harassment such as stalking. The bill would allow courts to temporarily remove firearms from residents deemed to be a danger to themselves or others. It would also ban rifle magazines capable of holding more than 5 bullets.
As a further part of this new legislation, we're also fighting gun smuggling and trafficking by increasing maximum criminal penalties and providing more tools for law enforcement to investigate firearm crimes. And we'll require the permanent alteration of long gun magazines so they can never hold more than 5 rounds.
However, the bill must still be passed by Parliament, with the ruling Liberals holding only a minority of seats. According to the government, there are approximately 1 million handguns in Canada. The government statistical agency has reported that firearms-related violent crimes account for less than 3% of all violent crimes in Canada. But since 2009, the per capita rate of guns being pointed at someone has nearly tripled, while the rate at which a gun was fired with an intent to kill or wound is up by 5-fold. Almost 2/3 of gun crimes in urban areas involved handguns.
And from Canada to now Lebanon. Lebanon's longtime Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri, who has been held the post for 30 years, was re-elected for a 7th 4-year term on Tuesday with a minimum number of required votes, a reflection of a shift in public opinion in the crumbling nation on the verge of bankruptcy. The new legislature is being ushered in as Lebanon's remain in the grip of worst economic and financial crisis in its modern history, rooted in decades of corruption and mismanagement by the ruling class, which has been running the country since the end of the civil war. Elected on May 15, the new parliament is deeply divided with no coalition holding majority seats in the 128-member legislature. The militant Hezbollah group and its allies lost the majority they had held since 2018 and now hold 61 seats, 4 short of an absolute majority. Iraq's parliament has passed a law that makes it a crime to normalize ties with Israel, and violations of the law can be punishable with a death sentence or life imprisonment. The law, titled Criminalizing Normalization and Establishment of Relations with the Zionist Entity, was approved last week with 275 legislators voting in favor of it in Iraq's 329-seat assembly. The parliament said in a statement that the legislation was a true reflection of the will of the people. Iraq's parliament has been unable to convene on any other issue bar the law prohibiting ties with Israel, including electing a new president and forming its own government, which has prolonged a political standoff in the country. Iraq has never recognized Israel, and Iraqi citizens and companies cannot visit Israel. The two nations have no diplomatic relations. It's time for a short break here. On the other side, UK elects its first Dalit female mayor in London Council. And there'll be much more. You stay tuned to Sansad TV. Welcome back after the break. You're watching Democracies of the World. Moving ahead, Mohinder K. Midha, Indian origin politician from the UK's opposition Labour Party, was elected mayor of Ealing Council in West London, becoming the first female mayor of a local London council belonging to the Dalit community. Midha received 2,272 votes and was elected for the next year's term of 2022-23. She campaigned on issues like tackling the cost of living, recovering from the pandemic, fighting violent crime and anti-social behaviour. In a historic move, Spain's parliament has approved a bill that emphasizes the importance of consent and makes it a key determinant in sexual assault cases. The bill, popularly known as Only Yes Means Yes, is aimed to tackle the ambiguous definition of consent in Spanish law and will make it easier for victims of sexual violence to prosecute their attackers.
Spain's parliament approved a bill that makes consent a key determinant in sexual assault cases, freeing survivors of having to prove that violence or intimidation was used against them. The Guarantee of Sexual Freedom Law, also known as the Only Yes Means Yes law, was approved by a clear margin in Parliament, with 201 votes in favour and 140 voting against and 3 abstaining. Now the bill must be approved by the Senate before coming into effect. Under the law, consent would have to be explicit. It states that yes means yes, and anything else, including silence, means no. Sex without explicit consent would therefore be considered rape. Non-consensual sex can now be considered aggression and subject to prison terms up to 15 years. It also proposes jail penalties for work-related sexual harassment and makes catcalling, sexually harassing a stranger in the street, a criminal offence for the first time. The bill also qualifies forced marriage and genital mutilation as criminal offences and stifles laws against pimping. The bill was also driven by the legal and social fallout from a notorious gang rape case 6 years ago. Spain's law had long relied on evidence of violence, resistance or intimidation to give judgment in sexual assault cases. A total of 2,143 rapes were reported in Spain in 2021, 14% more than the previous year and the highest figure on record. According to Amnesty International, 7 other European countries have introduced consent-based rape legislation. Since 2018, Denmark, Croatia, Greece, Malta, Sweden, Iceland and Slovenia. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Moving on, a civil union bill aimed at regulating relations of same-sex partners has passed the first vote in the Lithuanian parliament. 70 MPs voted in favour of the bill, with 49 votes against. The several MPs raised questions about whether legalizing same-sex partnerships would go against Catholic teachings. Only 6 MPs abstained from voting. An alternative and more conservative bill allowing same-sex couples to register intimate relationships has also passed the initial vote with 70 votes in favour, 23 against and 30 abstentions. The two bills will continue to be discussed together in the Parliament's committees and should return to the plenary on 21st June. The bill drafted by the ruling Conservative Liberal coalition is seen as a watered-down compromise after an earlier proposal instituting same-sex partnership failed to pass last year. Moving on, Thailand's new parliament building, the world's largest, has come under criticism after it was revealed that its member would have access to an indoor golf practice range, a karaoke bar, a spa room and a gym. A running track, massage area and a golf driving range were among the top amenities featured at the Bangkok compound. The parliament, which opened last year and surpassed Romania's Palace of Parliament in terms of floor area. Following a media tour of the club on Monday on the banks of Keo Phraya River, the Thai language hashtag Parliamentary Club was trending in Thailand. And that's all we have in this edition of our program on Democracies of the World. Connect with us on various social media platforms for all the latest from India and around the world. You can send in your feedback at Sansad TV at sansad.nic.in. Stay tuned for more informative programs on Sansad TV. Till then, goodbye, namaskar.